Well, hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really do hope that this conversation will add value to your life. A lot has changed in the last couple months. Before March, I had never heard the terms physical distancing or flattening the curve. And I've never in my life spent this much time at home. And I think that there's actually a lot that we can learn in these kinds of seasons. It's in some of the disruptions in life that we're able to gain clarity and focus. And I don't know what your experience has been. I know some people have really suffered. I know some people have really thrived. Honestly, I'm somewhere in the middle. But today I want to talk to a really good friend of mine and a member of the Unspoken Conversation team, Dr. Andrew Blackwood, also known as Coach Drew, to kind of mine out some of the wisdom that he's gleaned in the last little while. And Andrew has a really unique way that this season started for him. And so I am just brimming with curiosity. I intentionally told him I don't want to hear this full story until the interview, so my reactions can be as raw as possible. So welcome, Coach Drew. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
All righty. So take us back to the end of February, the beginning of March. You had some exciting plans for the middle of March that you had been preparing for. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you were planning?
Sure. I'm at this stage of my life where just taking the limits off. If I have an idea, a thought, inspired action that comes to me, I want to take it. I want to run with it. And I guess it's a revolt against all of my self-limiting beliefs and all that stuff that I've held with me for so very long. So I want to do more speaking. I want to impact more people. So I decided, you know what? I want to go on this speaking retreat to build my skills and get a little refresh. And hey, why not write a book while I'm at it? And it was all about choices, how I make choices when I feel anxious, because I've wrestled with anxiety in so many ways and phases of my life. So that's where I was. And that's, I went to Portugal. And then as I'm about to go, there's all this talk about COVID-19 and, like how it's impacting people and people should stay home and, not go anywhere. At this point, there were no real firm laws or decisions made by governments yet. So I decided to go.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you on the phone. I don't know if it was like the day before you went, but inside of me, I'm thinking you're crazy. Because again, I'm the type that definitely gets anxious, and I was just really feeling uncertain for you, and my prayer radar was definitely going pretty strong for you at that point. So you go, and I'm sitting here thinking, wow, like I am super impressed that he's willing to take this risk. I'm not sure I would do it, but you went.
Yeah.
You went, but then things changed again, because it was while you were gone in the first couple of days, I believe, that this was actually declared a pandemic and laws started to change, restrictions started to be introduced. And so you're in Portugal, and now you're having to, funny enough, talking about this book you wanted to write, now you're going to have to start making decisions again. So talk about the decision that you were faced with kind of as the situation was starting to evolve while you were in Portugal.
Yeah. So again, while I was there, things weren't firmed up yet. There was a lot of talk about what might happen in the days to come. Canada's decisions on a governmental level followed the US. So the US started to close their borders and flights were being canceled and the cost was going up. And so there was concern about, would I be able to get back home? Do I cut my trip short? Because it wasn't a long trip. But do I cut my trip short and try to make my way back? Um, and the stress of that totally eclipsed any kind of relaxation I was gonna have while I was there, by the way. And I don't know who's listening, but I, I I I promise you, I convinced myself that I had COVID at least 20, 30 times, over the next few weeks. So while I was there, I'm breaking into sweats and cold, I'm feeling cold. I'm doing all sorts of stuff in my body. I'm just like, oh my God, help me. I have COVID, right? I can't even go home to my kids and bring this with me. So you know, that said, with all the uncertainty around me, the only thing that was certain was me coming back to God. Like, God, you're the only one who knows what in the world is going on, what is going to happen. Um, so it was an opportunity for me to listen to him. And he only said two words to me: fear not.
Okay.
I'm hoping for sentences. I'm hoping for scriptures. I'm hoping for like a downloaded scroll from the heavens to like paint the. No, I didn't get that. All I got was fear not. And over the next couple of weeks, I learned more about what that meant and how to trust. And I'm still learning how to trust. Um, but even with those words, I kind of flipped in and out. I was listening, to what my counterparts who were there were hearing, because they're connected to different people all over the world. People had come from the States and different parts. So there were people who were, connected into government. And so they were just giving some information. And my wife is a nurse. And she works front lines, and she understands the latest as far as what was happening at the time. So I wasn't making decisions by myself. Um, Ultimately, the decision always came down to what I would choose to do. But yeah, so I had people, sharing their thoughts and their opinions about it. And prayerfully, I guess I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back. Um, in accordance with my plans, because it really didn't make sense to rush to the airport that day, because many people were rushing to the airport that day. So I would be just in an airport with many more people waiting without flights. So if it just seemed more likely that if I was going to contract the virus, it would happen in that, panicked scenario. So I waited, and I came back with my original flight, and with the understanding that I would be self quarantining in my home for 14 days.
So just a couple things there. Was the event that you were at canceled and you just had to wait around to go home at the original time, or did your event continue?
The event continued.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you were able to kind of finish out your trip, do the
Yes.
things that you had planned to do,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then, and I do find it interesting that you were talking about how you convinced yourself that you had it. And to be honest, and I'm really not trying to be, unsensitive here, but the symptoms, especially in the early days, the symptoms were so similar to so many other things that, like, if I had like a little bit of a runny nose, or I coughed because I ate too much pepper, like it had me scared, and I'm being serious.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, one of the things that made this so much more fear inducing for people, because the symptoms are so common. It wasn't like these symptoms were things that you knew for sure that you had it, because like we're hitting like allergy season, flu season was still going on. Like, I think that's really what created a lot of the fear. And so tell me a little bit more about some of those moments when you were convinced that you had it, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. It was back and forth, and um, people are going to know me really well by the end of this conversation. Um, but I had lived such a busy life for many, many years that I was really tired and burnt out by the time I got there. And I didn't realize, what kind of state my body was in. So a lot of the feelings that I had in that moment, it was burnout. But like you said, like the tightness of my chest, for example, when I get stressed out, I feel the tension in my back. I feel tightness in my chest because I slouch and I don't breathe properly. Um, so after months and months of that, like when I finally stopped, it's like the weight of all that stress for all those months kind of finally caught up with me. But it caught up with me during COVID, right? And although I was in Portugal, it was actually quite cold at night. So I would, I was cold. I had pain in my chest, and then I would cover myself in blankets, and then I would get hot. So I'm thinking, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm cold and I'm hot, I'm sweating, I'm sick. But then I would kind of put, you know, two and two together, be like, okay, no, that explains that, that explains that. So I'd talk myself back down. And then at night, when everything is quiet and still, that's when the brain starts to go up, active and imagine all these worst case scenarios. And so then I would get worked up in my head and then I would talk myself down. What was really helpful was the breath test, where you breathe in and hold your breath for 10 seconds. For me, I was holding my breath for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, because I wanted to make sure I was okay. So, my symptoms, they would dissipate and I would be fine. I would be relaxed again. And then at night, then I would worry again. And then, I'd remember what God said and I'd inquire what other people were saying. Um, so yeah, my brain was just working. And then, you know, all those lessons that I was learning and writing about, getting ready for the book. Yeah, I was living them over again and again and again and again.
Well, I want to be at the book release party because I think this is going to be really good.
Yeah.
And I really do connect with this, Andrew. And I don't know about you guys watching right now, but I remember in the first couple days, like when I first realized that this was serious, and I'm working as a pastor, and so when the decision was made, that we couldn't meet in person at our church, this was just so unprecedented. I remember going home and feeling sick for about 4 days, and I was afraid that I got the virus,
Mm.
and which at the time there were no confirmed cases where I was,
Right.
right? And so it was, and these things like you were talking about, it would dissipate, and you would only have the symptoms when you were thinking about it. And right, so it starts to kind of reveal that this is kind of our mind playing with us a little bit. And I don't want to move away from that lightly, because I feel like there's someone watching right now that has had that kind of thing play out, and you can hear from both of us that that happens, right? And you don't need to feel abnormal, or you don't need to feel like there's anything wrong with you because that's going on, because that happens to people. And so I just want you to be encouraged by that, just by hearing the fact that that has happened to other people. You're not the only one that is experiencing that. Now, let's continue this journey. You get to the airport. Tell me about the flight.
Well, it was really, nerve wracking, to be honest with you. Because going down, there were some concerns. People already, if somebody coughed, you look over your shoulder and try to distance yourself. But on the way back, it was even more so because almost everyone, if not everyone, had masks on. And the flight was over 8 hours long. So keeping a mask on for over 8 hours was not comfortable. Um, but again, at that point, I was you know, bouncing back and forth. How am I doing? Because at no point did I have a fever, right? So I think I took on the role more so of a curious kind of reporter, observer kind of person, and not just someone experiencing it. So I was just watching people, some people were concerned. There were some kids there, you know, and then one black gentleman, he said to me, "Black people don't get COVID." Basically, that's what he said. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep my mask on, because I was hearing so many different theories, from conspiracy theories to who susceptible and who's not. So it was really interesting, and it was interesting to see, with all the concerns that the things that were being put in place or not. When I got back to the airport here, I heard about screening. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna get a test when I get back, or somebody's gonna check my temperature or something. None of that happened. And again, I came back around midnight, maybe 12:30. So I was asked, where I was coming from, do I have a fever? That was the extent of the screening. Uh, so some people were disappointed that there wasn't more happening, but perhaps there was more happening in the day. Maybe they had, you know, medical personnel there, but
Well, because
um,
people don't get it at night either.
right, right. So yeah, so it was the tension was high, but honestly, I think so many people, they handled it so well. Everybody remained calm. Um, Everyone was polite and respectful. There was nobody who visibly seemed panicked, you know.
Right. And so I presume you got a ride home somehow.
Yes, I took, how did I get home? I can't. I think I Ubered home.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so you're heading home, and you're now going home from with the understanding that you're not going to be able to have physical contact with your wife, with your kids, and you were preparing for this probably emotionally leading up to this. But so what was it like to just in the moment that you arrived home? Like, it was pretty late, like I don't know if Aideen was awake or anything. So tell me about that moment of arriving at home.
Well, so the girls were away for the weekend at our grandparents. So, um, my lovely wife Aideen, she brought things downstairs to the basement that I would need. And we were, talking over the phone. And yeah, I headed down to the basement, had everything that I needed. Um, and I think the good thing is that I like my basement. At least I did, at the beginning of the 2 weeks. I liked it. It's always been a place that I love to retreat to and just be quiet down there. So on the one hand, I had already been away from home for several days, but then to not be able to engage with my family, I knew that would be tough. But on the other hand, I was saying, okay, this is going to be 2 weeks of, some alone prayer time and whatnot. Um, so that's kind of how it started. But then again, with the stress and, the burnout, I still had those physical kind of um, experiences that made me wonder, right?
Right.
And so I was looking into, testing and whatnot. And because I was not in contact with anybody who was a confirmed case, they wouldn't even test me. They just sent me home and said, okay, stay at home. Because if you come into the hospital where there are confirmed cases, you're more likely to contract it. So
Right.
so I ended up just going home, following the instructions, and um, praying and praying and praying, and um, yeah, and then just feeling a greater sense as the days went on of what it meant to just really trust and know that I was going to be okay, and to feel my body start to relax and decompress. And then I wanted to serve, I wanted to help. So I started doing stuff online, workshops and whatnot, not resting, not a good idea. But yeah, as the days went by, I was more and more, less and less concerned about um, whether or not I had it, because I really didn't believe I did. And then then I was also aware that you could be an asymptomatic carrier. So still trying to be as careful as possible, with an awareness that, if you're in the same house and you go anywhere, you know, it's highly unlikely that, you wouldn't be spreading it. So we were just always kind of talking and trying to be intentional about that. Um, it was difficult for the girls because they're still very young, um, to not be able to hug me and kiss me. Um, so that was tough on days, uh, but for the most part, they were happy I was home. They were aware, okay, the coronavirus, we were talking about it. Um, and again, because my wife is a nurse, um, just the education around it was good. Um, they were out of school, right? So a lot was happening and changing, but like most children, they're very resilient. I think it was much more difficult on the adults in our family than it was on the kids.
Right. And so I'm guessing there that your wife was preparing the girls when dad comes home, he's not going to be able to hug you, like things like that. Like, and so what would be some of the ways that you would recommend even communicating to children about this kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I err on the side of being explicit, depending on the age and maturity level of the child and their, unique developmental maturity and understanding. So we used the terms, we talked about it. Um, yeah, we didn't really hide anything about this particular topic. We just told them what it was.
Right. And so you're in the basement. How did you communicate with your family? Like, were you like phoning upstairs, or kind of tell me a little bit about the home experience during
Yeah,
that
we
time?
would do FaceTime most part until they had gone upstairs. And then I would come up if I had to grab something, and so thankfully I was able to still work home. Um, yeah, so we use technology. We use technology until um, mind you, it wasn't perfect. Sometimes they would just run up to me and hug my leg, you know. Um, but outside of that, we use technology uh, to our advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I remember thinking when you had told me that you were coming home and you were going to have to quarantine for 14 days and all of this, and I'm thinking to myself, is it even possible to stay in your house for 14 days? And then in some ways, the rest of us had to do a version of that at some point, right? If you weren't a frontline
Mm-hmm.
worker, a lot of people, if for no other reason than they had nowhere to go, were ended up being in their homes. And so in some ways, and I think one of the things for me about this is I normally feel like a real intense need to go out. And I don't know if it's like a fear of missing out or whatever that might be around that, but I haven't felt any of that because I kind of have that understanding that there's nowhere to go, right? So it's not like I'm missing it. And I don't know if maybe that's how other people feel, but I I don't know. This is just a strange situation, and I don't want to make light of the suffering. I really don't. But I also believe that if we can learn from this, we can benefit from this. And I do believe that 10, 20 years from now, we're going to be talking about this situation. Where were you in the spring of 2020? I do believe that that's going to be a conversation that's going to be on our minds for a very long time. So as we wrap up, you've shared some really great stuff about, fear not, and having a moment with God. And that is just great, right? Because a moment with God will change your life. And I do very much believe that. Are there any other tips or things that you learned when you were in your basement by yourself for those 14 days that you'd like to share with our viewers today?
Sure. The reality that faith is like everything else, it's progressive. It's something that we invest in continually and perpetually. I thought, if I had enough faith that I would never have fear. And I realized that fear is something that comes and we get to respond to it. So to not think it's strange when it does come, but to be aware that we don't function well in an environment of fear, right? I used to think that whole scriptural reference of, God hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and soundness of mind. I used to think of, a spirit as an entity as opposed to an environment, a culture, one that we can, fuel, right? Or be fueled by other things. So I limited my exposure to media. Like I stopped listening. I stopped talking to people who were, paying attention to the numbers, and like I just stopped. And I wouldn't say I instantly felt better, but I progressively felt better because I wasn't, you know, fueling my own thoughts or letting that stuff in. Um, so, you know, about, and again, repeating to myself and we started to unpack, what does it mean if God tells me fear not? Why would he tell me that? Then it gave me a chance to dig in. Oh, okay, well, because he knows that I'm okay. Oh, I'm gonna be okay. And for me, it was whether or not I have it or not, I'm gonna be okay, right?
Right.
So that was an important thing for me. Although I don't know the future, I could still be able to rest. I didn't need all the details to be able to rest and be okay, and to really um, trust what he had told me. So that those were some big points for me. I'm grateful that I awareness of how the thoughts impact the emotions and the emotions impact the body. So it was helpful knowing that. Um, and yeah, it was helpful to connect with people who were supportive and loving, encouraging. Um, yeah, reading things that were uplifting, watching things that were encouraging, or just being quiet and being still. So it was a balance of all those things. I did eventually start to see, I wouldn't say I was quite stirred, but I was ready to be out of that basement. I ran out of there on day 14, like, yes, you
And now
know,
you're on your back deck.
yeah.
And, I really do appreciate you sharing this. And I think that this has really given people, the situation has given people a new perspective on suffering and what, how things can crash. And I was just reflecting on this idea in the very beginning of this crisis that, I was talking to people about how much I don't know, how much I can't predict the future, how much I don't know what's really going to happen. And then I started thinking back, in the old days growing up in church, I used to hear people say, "These are my plans. Lord willing. And I used to always think that was really weird because it's like, well, are you going to do it or not? Like it just, I didn't quite get it, but I've really been able to, at least for me, grab a hold of that idea that Lord willing. And it's not that all of a sudden in March of 2020, we stopped knowing the future. The fact of the matter is we never did.
Right. Yeah.
You know, a lot of times we had the grace of our plans working out the way we thought they would. But the reality is we don't actually know. But as believers in Jesus, we have the ability to find refuge and to find that safe place with the one that does know.
Yeah.
And the one that does have control of everything. So there's a great song, and the chorus says this: many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow. Right? That to me has been something I have really grasped onto. And it sounds like for you as well, that this has actually been a faith building experience. This has been something that is doing a deep work in your soul.
100%, 100%. And, you know, as much as the political and even racial climate now, with all that's going on in the world and around the world, has just seemingly intensified. It's interesting that COVID impacted the world, and in some sense, it united us. It
Yeah.
made us think about the common human experience. Um, you know, COVID is respecter of no, is a respecter of no people, like, politicians and, people of all social societal strata. They were impacted, Um, so on some level, I really appreciated how our humanness became apparent, and how much, in my estimation, we really, like you said, don't have control. We can't see the future, but we can trust. We can trust God to take care of us. So that's the biggest learning for me that I'm still repeating. That's what I'm still learning to hold on to. My confidence is not in myself. It is in God and his plan and his help and his purpose, you know, that, he started this work in me and in you, and he'll bring it to completion. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for you, Jordan. I love with you. Public conversations. You're a wonderful conversationalist. You care. You ask really great questions and you listen so well. So thank you for all that you do and how you serve in various roles, but particularly in this one, and bringing conversations to people. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate this conversation. But again, I also really appreciate you. And I think there's more to be talked about. There's more to be learned. But I want to take a moment and pray, because there is a lot of suffering in this world. There is a lot of, you mentioned racial tensions. There's a lot of division in the world right now. And I just want to take a moment and I'll pray. And then I'd like you to close and just to pray for our world right now. And so, Heavenly Father, I thank you that you are the one that we can trust, that you are the one that we can rely on. And if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's how we are not in control. And so, God, I pray that you will do your work. I have talked to so many people that have experienced so much with you in the last couple months, that God, I pray that you would deposit those things deep in our hearts, that we will not forget the work that you have done in us in this season. But I also pray that you eradicate this virus in a miraculous way, that this is a destructive virus that is killing people, that you love. And so, God, I pray that however you choose to work through this situation and however you decide, that this virus will come to an end in Jesus' name. And Lord, I pray for unity. As in the beginning, I remember thinking that it was so encouraging to see how people from all ends of the political aisle were rallying around the fact that we need to protect our communities. But now, as different provinces and different states and different countries are making different decisions, we're starting to see some division, and we're starting to see questioning and that. And God, I just pray for unity. I pray that even if we don't agree, and even if we voice disagreement, that we would have a spirit of charity and we would have a spirit of compassion in the way that we communicate. And when we think about racial tensions in our world right now, God, again, I know you love every person. And I pray that you will stamp out this racism, this evil of racism that has taken hold in so many hearts and in ways that people don't even realize. So God, bring your peace, bring unity to us as we move forward, as we, as a world, seek to recover from the challenges that we've dealt with this year. Because I know that you have the power, and I know that you have the compassion to guide us through this. Oh Lord, please hear our prayer.
You know, Lord, we've seen firsthand what fear can do, how it can separate us from you, separate us from each other. But even in the separation, you're still speaking. You're still calling to us. You're still showing yourself to us. And I pray that we would hear clearly and that we would turn to you and allow the light and the love that you shed abroad in our hearts to cast out all fear, but also help us to see where we can turn to you, and then turn to each other so that we can love each other, so that we can be and give the best of ourselves to each other, because that's what you call us to do. You call us to be light and salt in the earth, to love each other, to love our neighbors, and, you know, love you. So thank you for your unfailing love. We thank you for your peace that passes all understanding. We thank you that our trials, our tribulations, even our suffering, it is an opportunity to experience comfort from you and comfort others. So help us not to miss the opportunities of these times. Help us to see them and to seize them, and continue to learn, heal, and grow. We thank you for your company. Thank you for being with us, leading and guiding us for these wonderful things. We say thank you in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so much, my friend. And thank you to everyone else that was watching today. We'll see you later.